If you could somehow capture 3,000 years of human movement, trade, migration, all on one small island, where would you even look? Well, our deep dive today is heading straight to Sri Lanka. It's a place that, look, for its size, it packs this incredibly complex, just stunning variety of human appearances. Maybe one of the most complex in all of South Asia.
No.
You just try and picture it, right? Imagine you're walking through, say, the Peta Market in Colombo, or maybe a village up in Jaffna. What hits you immediately is the sheer range. You'll see people with this deep, rich, mahogany skin walking right next to others with much lighter, almost golden tones. And the features. You might see sharp, almost European-looking noses right beside, broader features, fuller lips, the hair too, everything from jet black and straight to deep brown and really tightly curled. So it just begs this massive question, why? How does Sri Lanka end up with such a dense, concentrated variety of looks, especially compared to, say, its huge neighbor India? Okay, so let's try to unpack this a bit.
Our mission here is really get under the skin, you could say, of the history and the genetics that created this living mosaic. We're going to look at the data we have, things like melanin levels, even hair studies to see where all this incredible diversity actually comes from.
It's absolutely fascinating. And the key, I think, is seeing Sri Lanka not just as an island, but as this vital crossroads. For like 3,000 years, it's been a central hub in the Indian Ocean trade. So it's almost acted like a genetic magnet, pulling in influences, people, genes from basically everywhere.
Right, a magnet. I like that.
And modern genetics, it completely backs this up. When scientists map out the ancestry, they consistently find, well, at least 4 major layers, historically speaking, and these layers directly feed into the physical diversity you still see walking around today.
Okay, so give us the big 4. What are we talking about?
Right. So first, you've got the really ancient foundation, these South Indian Dravidian groups, that's layer 1. Then, crucially, the Indo-Aryan migrations coming down from North India. They brought major cultural shifts.
Yeah.
Language.
And presumably different physical traits, too.
Exactly. Then third, don't forget the centuries of interaction with Arab traders. Lots of intermarriage, particularly along the coasts. That's a huge influence. And finally, the more recent but still significant European admixture. Centuries of Portuguese, then Dutch, then British presence.
So it's not just one thing, it's the constant mixing of these 4 streams.
Precisely. It's the integration, not isolation, that really fuels this whole spectrum of appearance.
And you see that integration so clearly just looking at skin tones. I mean, the range is dramatic. You can find folks with really light, sort of beige complexions, often more in the cooler Central Highlands. And then just a few hours away on the coast, you might see people with these incredibly deep, almost ebony skin tones, especially in fishing communities. It's quite the contrast.
And there's actual data on this, specific numbers that show just how varied it is.
Yeah, I saw that 2018 dermatological survey. It measured melanin indices, the pigment levels, right?
Exactly. And the results are, frankly, surprising for such a small area. So upcountry Sinhalese populations, they averaged around 34.1 on this index. Then Tamil populations averaged a bit darker, 38.6.
Yeah.
And then the coastal Muslim communities reflecting, that Arab and maybe even some East African trade links, they had the highest average at 42.9.
Wow. Okay. Hold on. So you're saying from 34.1 to 42.9, that's nearly a 9-point difference in the average.
Yes, a 9-point average spread packed onto an island, roughly the size of West Virginia?
That density of variation is just wild.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting, maybe a bit complicated, because that variation in skin color isn't just, a neutral biological fact. It's loaded with social history, with meaning.
Ah, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Historically, and this is tied up with caste and colonialism, lighter skin often got associated with, elite status, power, while darker skin tones, unfortunately, often carried a stigma, especially, say, in things like marriage arrangements.
And that historical baggage, that bias, it hasn't just vanished, has it? You see it commercially.
Oh, absolutely not. It's right there in the market. You've got this massive fairness cream industry in Sri Lanka. We're talking, estimated over $120 million a year.
$120 million just on fairness cream.
Just on fairness creams. It's huge. And, critics quite rightly point out this reinforces those old, frankly colonial beauty standards.
But there's pushback now, right?
Definitely. There's a real tension now. You see younger generations, artists, activists, actively celebrating darker skin tones, reclaiming them as, authentically Sri Lankan, beautiful, strong. It's a definite cultural shift happening.
It's still pretty sobering, though, that those old ideas fuel such a massive industry today, focusing just on skin tone. But does that preference, that historical sort of elite or colonizer ideal, does it show up in other features too? Like when we look at faces, eyes, noses?
That's a really sharp question. And yes, basically the same kind of principle applies. Facial features are like another map of all that migration we talked about. Now, most people would assume correctly that dark brown eyes are dominant, and they are. But even within eye color, you find traces of history.
Okay, tell us about that. Are there lighter eyes?
Well, yes. Genetic studies have found that somewhere between, say, 9 and 11% of Sri Lankans actually carry the genetic markers, the alleles, for lighter eye shades.
Lighter light.
Like light brown, amber, even hazel sometimes, which is actually quite a high percentage for South Asia generally.
And where do you see that most?
It's much more common in the Berger communities. Those are the descendants of the mixed European, Portuguese and Dutch settlers. It's a direct genetic echo of that specific colonial mixing.
A genetic echo. Wow. And the bone structure, the shape of the face itself. Does that also map onto these different ancestries?
Absolutely. You can often sort of trace the lines. For instance, the ancient Dravidian ancestry, that often correlates with a certain look, maybe larger, more rounded eyes, broader noses, fuller lips. Whereas the Indo-Aryan influences, the ones that came from North India, they tend to bring narrower eye structures, maybe straighter noses, more oval or oblong face shapes. It's a general tendency, of course, but it's observable.
Okay. And the European influence again, especially in the Berger population.
Right. So anthropological studies focusing on Berger communities often note two things quite distinctly: a measurably higher bridge on the nose and often more angular, defined jawlines. These are traits directly linked back to those Portuguese and Dutch ancestors. So you see this blend, ancient layers and more recent ones, all visible together in the population.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Hair. Because hair texture seems to be another area where Sri Lanka is a bit of an outlier in the region.
Oh, definitely. Hair is fascinating there.
There's that big hair study that Trichology researched back in 2019. It found only about, 12% of Sri Lankans have naturally straight hair?
That's right. Only 12% straight. The vast majority, a huge 67%, have wavy hair, and then a full 21% have properly curly hair.
21% curly. That sounds really high for South Asia, doesn't it? Compared to India, for instance.
It is strikingly high, especially compared to northern Indian populations. And it's likely not just random chance. The main hypothesis is that this higher rate of curliness, of coiled hair, might be linked to those very old maritime connections with East Africa.
East Africa. Before the Europeans.
Way before. We're talking about possible settlement by Bantu-speaking groups, traders along the coasts centuries ago. It suggests this whole other layer of interaction written right into people's hair texture, a sort of forgotten history.
That's incredible. And what about hair color? Mostly black, I assume.
Mostly, yes. Jet black is the norm for the majority. But again, there's this interesting little anomaly. Around 4 to 6% of Sri Lankans have naturally lighter hair brown, sometimes even reddish hues.
Okay, don't tell me. European settlers again.
Bingo. That specific trait, the lighter hair colors, traces directly back to those 16th, 17th century Portuguese and Dutch settlers. And interestingly, those genes seem to be a bit more concentrated today in the Central Highlands, around Kandy perhaps, where some of the early European garrisons and interactions were focused. It's like a physical timestamp.
A timestamp and hair color. Okay, so we've done skin, face, hair. What about overall build, height, body composition? Is there diversity there too?
Yes, definitely. We often think height is just, set by region, but Sri Lanka shows interesting variation here as well.
So what are the averages, the WHO figures?
Right. The latest WHO data, I think from 2021, puts the average Sri Lankan man at 171 centimeters. It's about 5'7", and the average woman at 159 centimeters, so 5'3".
Seems fairly standard for the region, maybe.
On the surface, yes, but those national averages kind of hide some important details. For example, if you break it down by community, Tamil men, on average, are around 169 centimeters, while Sinhalese men average slightly taller at 172 centimeters.
Yeah, slight difference.
And you also see differences potentially linked to geography and traditional occupations. You tend to find maybe leaner builds in the upcountry areas compared to sometimes more muscular frames in coastal communities, fishing communities, places with more manual labor historically.
Right, that makes sense. But wait, there was something else in the sources about height. Something recent and frankly pretty astonishing.
Ah, yes. You're talking about the change over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, you mentioned the average male height is 171 centimeters now.
Yes. And here's a kicker. Since around the year 2000, correlating with significant economic growth and, crucially, big improvements in nutrition across the board. The national average height has increased by about 3 centimeters in just 2 decades.
3 centimeters, that's over an inch in 20 years.
Right.
Across the whole population average.
Exactly. It's like rapid-fire evolution driven by economics and diet.
That's incredible. It just shows how much environment and living standards can shape physical traits, not just deep ancestry. Biology isn't totally fixed.
Not at all. It's a powerful reminder of how adaptable populations can be, which leads us to a really critical, maybe more difficult social point.
Okay.
Well, you have all this amazing, rich biological diversity, but how does it get used or misused in society? How does appearance get tangled up in identity politics and social friction?
Right, because Sri Lanka has had deep divisions.
Exactly. The long civil war, tragically, really hardened some of those lines. And even today, you still hear accounts, people report facing discrimination based on how they look, assumptions being made about their background, their community, based on facial features or skin tone or body type. It leads to stereotyping, bias. It's a painful reality.
It is a tragedy when biology gets twisted like that.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating, and maybe hopeful, is that the actual science, the genetics, it pushes back against that narrative of strict separation, doesn't it?
It really does. There was a major genome study back in 2016.
Yes, I remember reading about that.
And it delivered this crucial counterpoint. It showed that between the Sinhalese and Tamil populations, the two largest groups, there's over 40% shared ancestry.
40% shared. So the biological lines that politics tries to draw are actually really blurry.
Extremely blurry. Genetically, they are far more interconnected than the divisive narratives would have you believe. The differences that cause tension are largely cultural, linguistic, historical grievances, not deep biological divides.
Yet that perception gap seems huge, especially when you look at things like media.
Oh, absolutely. That's where you see the tension play out very visibly. Think about media representation, beauty standards. There's often criticism, and probably rightly so, that things like beauty pageants, advertising, they tend to favor those mixed European, burger-associated features, the higher nose bridge, the angular jawline.
Which critics say doesn't really reflect the majority look.
Precisely. They argue it doesn't represent the more common features rooted in the broader Dravidian or Indo-Aryan ancestries. It's like that historical bias towards the elite or colonial look playing out again today.
Okay, one last area then.
Yeah.
How is all this seen from the outside, globally? Because Sri Lankans often get mistaken for Indians, right? And that causes some debate.
Oh, a huge debate, especially in the diaspora. Is the Sri Lankan look truly distinct? Or just, a regional variation within a broader South Asian template?
What's the argument for distinctiveness?
Well, many people argue passionately that the specific blend in Sri Lanka creates something unique. They'll point to the combination of factors we've discussed, generally leaner builds compared to some Indian populations, those significantly higher rates of curly hair, especially compared to North India, and that unique skin tone spectrum influenced by the Arab and potentially East African gene flow.
So it's the total package, the specific combination that makes it distinct.
That's the argument. The unique outcome of those 4 specific ancestral streams mixing over millennia on the island.
And you can see that duality even in famous figures, can't you?
Absolutely beautifully. I mean, think of someone like the sprinter Yuponabe Kun, tall, very lean, athletic frame. Then compare him to, say, the cricket legend Lasith Malinga, famous for his powerful build and that iconic, almost golden, tightly curled hair.
Right. Both undeniably Sri Lankan, but they look so different.
Exactly. They completely defy any single simple stereotype. And maybe that refusal to fit one mold, that very diversity, is the definition of the Sri Lankan look.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway? Sri Lanka's appearance isn't about one single trait. It's not one skin tone, one hair type, one face shape. It really is this living, breathing mosaic. It's like a compressed history book written onto the population, Dravidian, Indo-Aryan, Arab, European ancestries all blended together. Here, diversity isn't just present. It feels like it's the fundamental role. It defines the nation's appearance.
It really does.
Yeah.
And as we've touched on, the ongoing debates about beauty standards, the shadow of identity politics, the choices media makes about who represents the nation, it all shows this story is still very much alive, still being written. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you to ponder. Is the Sri Lankan look ultimately defined by the richness of the diversity itself, the scientific truth of that shared mixed ancestry? Or is it still being defined by how society chooses to value or highlight certain features while perhaps sidelining others? That's a question we're thinking about.